Hey, good morning. Hope everyone is doing well. On behalf of the North Carolina Chamber, just want to thank you guys for being here and attending the Reaching Your Future Workforce webinar sponsored by ScholarPath. So I'm Jake Sipe. I am with the North Carolina Chamber. And I know there's lots of places that you could be spending your time this morning. So we're thankful that you are spending it here with us. So a couple of just kind of like housekeeping items to start out with. So all attendees are muted to avoid any distractions during today's presentation. And so if time permits, and we're planning on having a period for this of Q&A kind of at the end. If you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A box. So there's like a chat box and then a Q&A box. If you can put it in the Q&A box, we will answer as many questions as we can at the end of the webinar. So the other housekeeping item to end with is, so this webinar is being recorded. You'll get it within 24 hours of ending. And so if you miss anything, you'll have that recording. If you want to share it internally, you'll have it as well. But those are kind of the housekeeping items. So before we get started, wanted to thank ScholarPath, the presenting sponsor of this webinar, and it kind of allowed us to have it open to the public and gave us the ability to have this. So I want to thank them. And so ScholarPath is an education platform designed to help high school students pursue a future true to their talents and passion. It connects students with multiple options for the next steps after high school and provides a safe and secure space in which providers can search for prospective candidates and then open the lines of communication between parties. So again, we want to thank them for being the presenting sponsor of this webinar. So with that, I'll introduce our great group of panelists. And really excited about this. We have a diverse group that kind of comes at it from a lot of different perspectives. So I think it's going to be a great conversation. So we'll lead off with Senator Deanna Ballard, and she has represented counties in Northwest North Carolina since 2016. She before that, spent 7.5 years in the George W. Bush administration in Washington, D.C., and also 13 years in nonprofit management at Samaritan's Purse in Boone, North Carolina. We also have Catherine Costellos, who has been working with the Apprenticeship and Training Bureau since 2006. The Bureau was transferred to the Department of Commerce and then to the North Carolina Community College System, where she serves as Director of Apprenticeship North Carolina, which she's had that position since 2017. We have Mick Goslin, who is the Director of Business Development for ScholarPath, and he has been with ScholarPath from the beginning, and so has an interesting perspective on that. And last, we have Lisa Lassiter, who serves as the Director of Workforce Development with ECU Health. And so she is responsible for workforce development initiatives for ECU Health, which is a private, not-for-profit health system in Eastern North Carolina. So I want to thank you all for being here and participating. And with that, we'll kind of get started with the questions. And so the first question, I think, is a good kind of broad question. And so, from y'all's perspective, what is the business community doing? What is the business community already doing well to engage students and build their talent pipelines And then where is there, need for, improvement, or where can we get better? And so I will ask Lisa to lead us off, and then other panelists can join in as they see fit. But Lisa, if you want to take a crack at that to start out with.
Sure. Thanks, Jake. Thanks for letting me be here today. So I'm going to start off by saying I think that businesses vary in how they are partnering right now. Some are not partnering at all. Some are just dipping their toe in it, and some are full-fledged, involved in it. I can only speak predominantly for ECU Health. We've been doing a workforce development initiative since 2000. So we kind of jumped in this game early on. We actually have a health sciences academy here with Pitt County Schools that we fund, as well as one with Duplin County. And that program recruits students who are in the 8th grade, and we actively engage them 9th through 12th grade with exposure activities. That can be anything from shadowing, information sessions, leadership training, soft skill building with them. And there are requirements in order to be engaged in that group. In Pitt County, we usually run a roster of between 900 and 1,100 students, depending on what time of the year you're looking at. Recruitment brings us up higher, of course. And at Duplin, we run a roster of about 250 students. As well as that, we have tours, we have speakers, we have career nights. We also work really hard to engage our teachers. We have a program here called the Teachers Executive Institute. You can expand exponentially your work by talking to teachers and educating them on the many, many opportunities within your organization. And the more they know, the more they can help facilitate those students and guide them. And that's from very, very young ages all the way up to into the college, so that they are aware of what are the needs for those students. I would also tell you to partner with like businesses. For us, we have a lot of partnerships within our community. That's predominantly what my job consists of, is creating, facilitating, and working through partnerships and thinking through all the different many things that we can do to engage students. There's seriously a million different ways you can work to engage them. We have strong partnerships with the Greenville Pitt Chamber, Eastern AHEC, our community college system, ECU. And then when I say ECU, I'm talking very broadly because it's both our allied health and nursing programs, ECU School of Dental Medicine, Brody School of Medicine, the school systems, and things for needed improvement. Well, I'm going to tell you, the faster you can reach them, the better off you are. And we are usually stretched bandwidth wise, but we always want to go lower into those grades, because you're forming a foundation with them. And it might just be making them comfortable with your organization. Being a hospital can be very scary for youth. So reaching them earlier, especially in those middle school grades, because that's where you're setting the stage for what's needed when they do get into the high school and start that pathway into a career. And the other thing I'm going to tell you is counseling. I think there needs to be more clarity in the pathways to specific careers. I'm a big proponent for career development counselors, counselors in the school, and the Health Sciences Academy. We actually employ 2 counselors so that they can touch every single school each week to guide these students. And you can guide in so many different ways, from keeping those grades up where they need to be, to talking to them about the different activities, and really talking to them about specific careers. And if you want to be a fill in the blank, then what is the education that you have to go for that? What are the schools that provide that degree? How much money is that going to cost you? How much time is that going to require? So I would say those are the 2 areas that I see that need the most improvement.
Jake, this is Catherine. Could I add to what Lisa says here? And I think she is very spot on. And just to give you a different perspective, as far as building the talent pipeline, we work directly with employers and to help them fill their employment needs. So in building that talent pipeline, we're working like with partners like Lisa specifically even down to the high schools. We work directly with the local CTE directors and bridging that communication gap, or that gap, if you will, from high school students to employers. And with a registered apprenticeship, they can hire them under the age of 18. Still, there's still some things some students, depending on the occupation, they can't do. But that's one area where we are trying to assist employers with building that talent pipeline. It's just like Lisa said, the earlier you start, the better. And I agree with her 100%. She is very spot on. And then in turn, we're also going to, of course, our community college partners across the state. For those students who are getting ready to graduate in a specific career, go ahead and linking them up with employers in that area so they can go ahead and start working and finishing their degree while they're applying that knowledge to the job. And then, of course, universities, we're partnering with universities, specifically HBCUs, to help employers create more diversity with their employees. We have a strong relationship with the community-based organizations across the state to reach to more underrepresented populations, because there's face it, before COVID, we were talking about a talent shortage. And then since COVID, it's just grown exponentially. So I think those are areas for us in our apprenticeship that we're helping employers to develop training plans, reach to all these individuals, create more diversity, and try to fill those talent pipeline as indicated. And as Lisa said, we're growing with our universities too, because we have some employers who started in high school, and to keep those students engaged now that they finish their apprenticeship in that career path, they're creating an additional career path for the students that includes the 4-year degree. So we're coming full circle with apprenticeship from high school, community college, and universities.
If I may just piggyback real quick, I'll be brief since I know we have several questions to get through today. I really want to take the opportunity to lift up, your question was really what the business community is doing well. At a local level, I think your businesses are being really innovative and just thoughtful and intentional with local partners in order to build the pipelines that they need in their community. So I want to, like what Lisa was talking about and the proactive approach that they've had at ECU Health and what they're doing, you can find that and you see that in a lot of smaller and even, smaller communities across the state. So I think it's important to lift up. It's not just the big companies that are coming into North Carolina, but the small companies that are close to home in your community that are really being proactive and innovative in that scene. The thing for improvement, I would say at a larger level, at the state level, the communication of what is really happening and taking place. And I think more businesses need to own that, or chambers need to be lifting each other up in terms of what their stories are in their communities in order to really continue to highlight what their offerings are, what the opportunities are. But I just think there's still more room for improvement in telling the story of what really is taking place in workforce development in North Carolina.
Yeah, and Jake, if I can just quicken there, I'm going to say hi to Senator Ballard. I've met you a couple times with Doug Mitchell, one of our founders, and I think we want to give a kudos that the people are going to hear more and more about ScholarPath. I know, and I don't want to turn this into a commercial, but the legislators in North Carolina have invested into this as an issue and a platform with ScholarPath that is full intentions of helping bridge that gap and getting those opportunities and those messages directly into the students' hands. We see a lot of businesses that have initiatives, programs, groups put together, but no matter where we go in the country, we see a barrier of actually getting that information to the students. Counselors are overwhelmed, CTE coordinators are overwhelmed. So no matter what gets put together outside, improving that direct communication to the students, for the students to learn and be educated, is what I think is a good help for industry. And again, Deanna and the rest of the legislators in North Carolina are working towards helping improve that. Great.
Second question is which I feel like is kind of a softball, but it's I think a good conversation starter. how important is career training? So apprenticeships, technical education, customized training to workforce readiness. And so, Catherine, I have a feeling you have a strong opinion about this, so I'll let you lead off. Yeah.
Well, you're correct. I'm not sure why you think that, but yeah. No, yes, I do have a strong opinion because I actually have been in apprenticeship for over 25 years. I've seen it work. I've heard from businesses. I've seen how important it is to really establish early that career path and give those students opportunities to engage with employers. And we even offer pre-apprenticeships to develop applicant pools for employers to choose from. That's in high school, community college, youth and adult. But that gives them an opportunity, especially a young person, to be engaged with that employer, to be in that environment. This is what it looks like. This is what it smells like. This is what is happening. Is this what you want to do? And it gives that employer a chance to say, you know what, this person really has potential. This person is really excelling here. And that gets them on that career path. They're much more engaged in the classroom. They're much more engaged with the employer because they're like, oh, this is what we talked about in class. This is what we do on the job. And they're very much more engaged. We have some apprentices who are solving major problems with huge corporations because they have that mindset and thinking out of the box. But going with what Mick said about the legislature and Senator Ballard, yeah, I'm so happy to see that you could take time to be on this call because we just recently received funding from the legislature, $2 million to begin with to help spread the word about apprenticeship. We're talking about communication here. That is key. There are a lot of resources in the state that many employers don't know about. And then the legislature provided $12 million for us to reach small businesses like Senator Ballard was talking about. There's a lot of innovative things happening, especially in the rural areas. So we have funds that's going directly to employers in Tier 1, Tier 2 counties to help them with training costs. It's specific. The legislature decided they wanted to use it for small companies, which are 500 or less employees. Tier 1, Tier 2 counties that was designated by the North Carolina Department of Commerce in 2020. And for youth, ages 16 to 25 and in high demand occupations, which is determined by the Department of Commerce. So we are already out of those funds, we have obligated $4 million to small businesses in North Carolina to help them with training costs. And these are funds that are averaging anywhere from $17,000 per apprentice up to $24,000 per apprentice to help those employers in those areas to grow their workforce and to create that talent pipeline. So apprenticeship is something that is not only just in our state, nationwide it's growing. This administration is funding millions of dollars for training, for apprenticeships for every state. We were just awarded $4 million from the Apprenticeship Building America grant to help with training costs and employers of all ages in any area of the state. So we have several funding pools that we're utilizing right now in partnership with our community colleges to get the word out, to get the money out, to help employers to grow their workforce, and specifically with helping them with those training costs, because that is really what impacts them. It just costs so much. And with the economy now, you're having to pay higher wages, and some of these funds can be to reimburse for on-the-job training expenses. For example, if it's costing you $12 an hour for this new person, we can reimburse you up to $6 per hour for the first 2 years of training. So there are lots of resources. So we want to make sure that employers know, what is being done across the state to help them build their workforce.
And may I chime in? As Catherine has said, it's just so critical right now. You'll see it's also not just about funding and resources as well. There are ways to really help businesses ensure we're getting just the expansive pool of students into the workplace. So for example, I mean, gosh, this was 2018, I think. I mean, we expanded opportunities for apprenticeships into, the 16-year-old as far as what industries they could actually get hands-on experience. Because I'll be honest, the North Carolina Department of Labor had stricter standards for what you would call detrimental sort of workplace scenarios and than the feds. So what we ended up coming back doing is sort of streamlining some of that to allow more offerings from businesses who are super hands-on. And you're going to find that in a lot of your rural communities, I mean, we always talk about welding and stuff, but you're talking like construction, you're talking like pavement, I mean, concrete, like folks, I mean, all of these businesses. So those are providing, I just think we always need to keep in mind too, that it's not always just about more resources and more money, but also what can we do in working with regulations and streamlining and really cleaning that up a bit to expand and offer some more of this. So we were able to work with the North Carolina Department of Labor on this and for just way more, I guess, opportunities and open doors for that space. So I think that's critical. It goes back to that point of how quickly can we get into that education base and that pool, and then what else can we just be doing? I think just on that side of things. So,
well, I'll wrap you up and tell you that if students don't see it, they don't know it, and so on-job training is critical to some of the roles. And I will tell you that I think that our youth today kind of equate. Now I'm speaking for healthcare, but I can't tell you how many times I hear the word Grey's Anatomy. And so I have to do a lot of education on the fact that Grey's Anatomy is a drama, and it's there, to entice you that way. And then start talking about the realities of healthcare, especially in a rural setting. I'm from the East Coast area, so we have critical access hospitals that are very, very small and very, very rural areas, and that can offer challenges that you may not have, in the middle part of the state. So it's very important for them to actually be involved and actually see it, to understand it, because the perception is not always the reality.
And can I have half a second, Jake, or not?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and you guys got to kick me if I start sounding like a salesman too much, okay? But that's my background. But I with what Lisa said, I got to jump on board with is these students, they need to see, not just hear about, but they need to see what the opportunities and different things are that are out there for them to look into and dig into and find out about. And I was at a hospital with my wife checking on her father, or my father-in-law, and we're sitting in the cafeteria and I see two ropes dangling from the outside of the windows. It's a real tall atrium style lunchroom area. And here come two guys rappelling down the ropes. Well, they were window cleaners. I couldn't help myself. I had to go talk to them, find out how they got into that trade. If anybody, I'm 56 years old and didn't stop and think about that. That's a trade that needs workers, needs students. And that's what we're really working towards, is getting that type of information, videos right in a kid's hand. A kid takes about 1.7 seconds to decide if they have any interest. It's the TikTok world that we're living in. And, that's what we're trying to get, and what, North Carolina is investing in, of having those kids through us the ability to get that 1.7 second attention and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe I should look into something like this, and feed those kids into the apprenticeship programs and to the bigger schools and our bigger companies and the small companies, to know that there's local opportunities right around them. They don't have to leave the county. We have a county here in Missouri, they lose about 80% of their students. They get 60-something% of them back after 2.5 years. They don't need to leave. They can hang on to them.
And Jake, I would like to also mention, and I did mention earlier, but these grant funds, they're temporary. But we have in North Carolina, and it's no other state has, in 2016, legislation was passed that if there is a high school student registered as a pre-apprentice or a registered apprentice, graduates from high school, continues with their apprenticeship, the tuition is waived at the community college. So we have a lot of employers that are being able to take advantage of that situation and using the grant funds to cover the other training expenses. So yeah, make it quick.
Great. Well, the next question was, how do we help more employers provide these opportunities when facing obstacles such as liability concerns or funding? Which I feel like we touched on that, but Senator Ballard, if you have anything to add, certainly we'll open up, but I feel like you touched on that with the regulatory stuff. But, if there's any more to that story, certainly would love to hear, or if you have any additional thoughts.
No, I mean, I just think we have to be cognizant of the liability concerns that businesses might have. And this is one thing, I mean, we were trying to do in the legislation. It was the one complaint. I mean, we actually held like a small roundtable discussion on this between businesses and the education system and what were the obstacles. And so then we just dug in, rolled up our sleeves to figure out how can we really clean that up and make that a bit more efficient. And so I just think it requires, just thinking, like I said, just about those concerns as well, and then what we can be doing in that space.
There's another area, I briefly touched on it earlier. With apprenticeship, of course you can be any age. You have to be at least 16, but you can be of any age older than that. But we do have a lot of employers who say, I can't have someone under 18. My insurance policy does not allow us to have someone on the floor at that age. So we have been able to work with employers and with the Department of Labor, because the North Carolina Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division are definitely our partners. They help us communicate with employers. We link several employers with them to know, just like, the Senator Ballard was talking about. So they have a good understanding. But there's also other possibilities, such as, temp agencies that can provide insurance. High schools. So a lot of people do not know in North Carolina that that if there is a high school student, their insurance is being covered by the state. So we have some companies that says that still doesn't matter. We have some companies that use temp agencies for a pre-apprenticeship to make sure these students are going to work out. That seems to have helped. And of course, getting them in there, like Lisa and Mick said, get them in there. That exposure is key. If they don't know about it, if they don't know that, oh, I want to go into the healthcare field, but oh, by the way, now that I have to draw blood, I can't deal with blood. So I have literally heard people tell me that. So this gives them a good opportunity to do that.
Great. So the next question is, I think we've talked about some of this, but explore it a little bit more. How can we deepen business engagement through the education system? And so what are some, tangible tools to do that for employers? And so I will let Mick lead off on this one. I know he probably has some thoughts about it, but Mick, floor is yours.
Thanks, Jake. Yeah, I've been about 30 plus years in business to business sales, and I've had 35 plus, I forget how old I am. And I've spent that same amount of time and a little longer, about 37 years, volunteer coaching wrestling inside the high schools. So my son's a teacher. I'm surrounded by teachers, surrounded by coaches, and there's always been this involvement and relationships built with these high school students. But my life has been out in the business world, business to business sales, and it just becomes more and more obvious of the wall that is built up between the real world, or the businesses, the entities that have messages and opportunities to get in front of kids that don't make it in front of the kids. And it's not a blame on anyone, but counselors, I'm in Missouri right now, a counselor in Missouri, average number of students, 420 something students that a counselor has. CTE coordinators, it's a little bit better than that, but they have relationships. But finding that person inside the school that has the relationship with the student that can communicate, and then having a tool or a way not to send the information through that person, but for getting the information or the opportunity or the message directly to the student in their hands, and then letting that student go to who they have that relationship with to help guide them is what we're really seeing, and that we see the benefit in what ScholarPath's doing. We don't want to replace a counselor. We don't want to replace a CTAE coordinator. We want to help complement that, and make sure these kids see the opportunities. Because if they see it and it sparks them, they're going to run. They're going to dig into it. They're going to want to be involved. But when they don't know what they don't know, like everybody says, it's hard for them to really jump on that. The programs that the businesses have currently, there are so, I didn't grow up inside education. I've always been in the business world. I've gotten the past year and a half more and more exposed to the education side of the world with being involved with ScholarPath. And there's so many great programs outside of the schools and some great programs inside the schools, but nothing lets them connect and talk without a very, very small funnel going through the counselors, teachers, or administrators. We want to open that funnel up and put those opportunities directly in those kids' hands, and not just in a broad manner, but in a way that people have the ability to be very specific if they are working on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, or there is a construction industry. We have several groups in Missouri that are women in the trades. Through the platform, they can send a very focused message to the females to encourage them to explore and look into the trades. Those types of things, that world, that environment is what it's going to take for us to get these kids to know really what's out there.
Jake, one area that we're working with employers to help deepen that is we have several consortia of employers that we are working with, that we could connect them to their local high schools, and they literally have a schedule and a plan that they work with themselves to go and recruit, in this particular case, high schools and community colleges. The employers are going in front of the students at these schools and saying, hey, I'm employer XYZ, and I'm offering you X amount of dollars to come and work with me and learn the job and learn the occupation. And we have students graduating from high school averaging $40,000 a year, community college, they're in their degree, they're flowing through. And it's taken those employers, to make it real for those students. When, I can go in there and say, oh, we've got all kinds of things for you. It's better than sliced bread. But as an employer, to be there and stand in front of them, and then to hear other students talk about, oh, well, I just bought my first truck. How could you afford a truck? Well, I'm working while I'm going to school. And buying houses, being able to do that is one way. We're getting those employers in front of those students.
Jake, just to kind of succinctly, I guess, sort of put some of this, really the deepen relationships are deepening, that engagement is through relationships. So it's really businesses and the education system being proactive with each other, working together and diligently doing that. It's not just a one-off sort of program here or there, but being consistent and diligent in those efforts. I remember going in the classroom, this is several years ago, talking to students, and they were bringing in folks from GE Aviation, so to speak, to talk about what they're doing, and I just flipped it on it. And I was like, why are they coming to you? You should take the students to them, to the workplace. It's advanced manufacturing firsthand, and you see it out of the gate. So like that excites students when they can see what they can do, and this is in a rural community, and this is in their own backyard. So I do think those relationships and building those relationships, and then what we keep going over and over, I know we hit this point, but getting those kids in front of like the actual industry, or in hands-on in that industry. And then I would say the second way to sort of deepen some of this business engagement and tangible tools is really to look at best practices, and those consortiums that Catherine's been talking about, or even the chamber itself, the NC chamber, is really lifting up what best practices are taking place, and then helping those who may not, in other parts of the state that may aren't be aware, or here's some other ways to think about this, and really spreading the word, and being a tool and a resource for those communities too. So I would just say out of the gate, those are kind of, you know, two things. And then one thing I have encouraged with businesses is in local rural communities. I'm a lot, and clearly I spend a lot of time even across the state down east too, but is engaging families as a whole. So for example, GE Aviation is a lot of people did not know that that business was really in their own backyard. So I encourage, you know, you should have a community day or a family day and just open it up the gates and let people come in and see what's going on. So I think deepening even through education system with those families, and not just the students and the teachers, but I mean, let's like go another layer in, and how do we engage parents too to understand what's offering right now. But I mean, those are just a few comments.
Yeah.
And Jake, last quick on a close one on that. The one thing that was brought up a couple times, I think by Lisa and maybe Catherine, is the career pathway identification, you know, a path cluster, pathway, and then an actual job. With what we're moving forward with, and I keep going back to Deanna, but she was involved with this, all the legislators were, with the pilot program that ScholarPath is doing. Any of the high schools that we're in, the industry, outside world industry, will be able to determine how many students are on what career pathway and cluster based on the courses, the classes that they're taking. So even if the student didn't say, I want to be X, you will be able, as a state, be able to tell inside a high school how many students in that high school are taking the courses that would have them prepared to be a certain job position or what pathway they're on. And that can be huge for businesses to know what that pipeline looks like in the areas that they are.
Great. Yeah. So the next question, and I know, Lisa, we kind of talked about when you first got started, and so we'll let you talk about this one, but you know, what would you recommend, you know, for a company, you know, no matter what the size is, who's kind of looking at this workforce, you know, challenge, and they're just starting to kind of think about how to get involved and kind of do the things that we're talking about. You know, what would you recommend, you know, for those companies that are just kind of getting started, and, you know, the first things and most important things for them to focus on?
Well, I think connecting into their school systems and just going to the school system and remembering that, you know, it's a symbiotic relationship. You know, you can both have a win-win, but you're gonna have to define what your needs are and also start fulfilling what the school's needs are. You know, you can go to the school system and start a conversation and ask them, you know, what are their needs? In order for business to actually have any type of voice within the school system, they have to be willing to participate with the school system. School systems are the ones who are training our future workforce. So I can't imagine why you would not want to engage with them, to tell them what they're doing great, to tell them some of the things that you're seeing that your current workforce doesn't have, and try to help with ways that you can make improvements in those areas. So I would say just reaching out and actually having a conversation on both sides as far as what you can do, and then start looking at different activities that can support whatever those goals are.
Great. So I think it's an interesting question, and one of the things that you know, at the chamber we deal with a lot is, you know, obviously businesses are looking at this problem and it's hitting them in the face every day, and there's obviously this kind of short-term crunch, but you know, when we're talking about this, we know that this is a long-term kind of problem. And so, you know, how can we help employers shift to kind of a long-term investment mindset on engaging students when, you know, they're certainly understandably heavily focused on more immediate kind of labor shortage issues. And so Senator Ballard, if you want to lead off on this one, floor is yours.
Sure. I mean, it's kind of again, it's a lot of proactive and anticipating, I guess, thinking or thoughtfulness on perhaps the end of the employer too. I'll give you an example. About a year and a half ago, I get a call from really a successful businessman out of Winston-Salem, and anticipating the needs in the high tech, or the tech sector coming up, like jobs in the next 5 years. So really thinking through, okay, what can we be doing now? And even aside from the immediate, but what can we be doing now in order to build a program or accelerator type space, and getting those jobs filled even in the next 4 to 5 years, so to speak. So I really think it's getting to the right people to figure out, okay, what's really the anticipated industry demand, or, ahead, thinking, further ahead, not just 2 to 3 years, but even the 5 to 6. And going back to the drawing board a little bit and thinking through, well, how can we create a swift and excellent pipeline, high quality pipeline, and get these folks into jobs. So, I would say a lot of that proactive, anticipating type thinking. And then, really developing kind of that, for example, we did this with the high tech accelerator Spark NC. If you guys aren't familiar with that, look that up. But that came out as a result of, that conversation. As far as immediate, look at what some of your local, Surrey Yadkin Works is another good example, work-based learning opportunities. And I think the North Carolina Business Community or Business Committee on Education lifted that up recently too. So I just think there's a lot going on in various ends of the spectrum in terms of immediate and long-term that you can just kind of, I think some employers are already thinking that way. And I just think some are your retail and your restaurant, they're just an immediate need. So it's really kind of trying to come in and how can you help think through incentives in order to get those folks into the workplace. But at the end of the day, we're dealing more with sometimes, we focus just on a skills gap scenario, but it's also right now we're dealing with a little bit of a will gap, meaning motivation of the individual to actually work, and how to reach that. So, there's just a lot going on. So.
If I can add, oh, go ahead, Mick. Okay. I think employers, it's very difficult for a lot of employers to realize that a lot of this, and I think we've mentioned several things. All of us are I think we all have an agreement that it's all about relationships and finding out the resources that are available to you. And that this is not necessarily a short-term fix, because there is no short-term fix. There really isn't one. There is a plan to begin and develop talent pipelines in different agencies, in different resources, in different areas, specifically your education system, and making sure that that is communicated to students so that there is a plan, there is a talent pipeline being built. And as it grows, word of mouth will get that out. Employers will talk to other employers. We have an example of a consortium out in the western part of the state that started out with four employers, and now they're up to 54. And they have over 100 apprentices working. So that's at least 2 just in that one area. So, and it's growing. It started out with 4 apprentices, and now we're up to 100. But it is working. It's working in developing that relationship and building that talent pipeline so that we are prepared with what's coming down the road. What is the forecast coming for employers, and how can we better utilize the resources that we have in North Carolina to help the employers here so that they can grow.
And one point too to add that, as we talk even about community college specifically, there was the state actually partnered with the John M. Belk Endowment and did a return on investment sort of economic impact of what your local community college, how that impacts the local workforce or, the local economy and what industry. So then all that's doing is providing a context of conversation with employers to say, hey, here's what the big bang for our buck that we're bringing to this industry locally. And then that gets them in a mindset of even thinking more long-term, in my opinion, and how they want to be a part of that, and knowing, oh my gosh, this is incredibly valuable. And this is really the, whether it's construction, I mean, whether it's healthcare, and I mean, whether it's banking, I mean, just really understanding what that return on investment is locally, only, I think, really motivates and just ignite a little bit more forward thinking approach, with businesses and employers too.
And Jake, from a suggestion or just an observation standpoint, it seems like when we're working with companies, if we're just dealing directly with their talent acquisition team or their recruiters, they have more of that. They try to think long-term, but their bonus goals, everything is on hiring people right now. The companies that have started involving other departments, even as simple as the marketing department, their social media side, and getting them working together with that talent acquisition group as part of the bigger picture, the light bulbs seem to start going on pretty well. And then also, as everybody's brought up, the further down the grade level that you get, the light bulb went off for me. The military, and I'm not going to quote the exact numbers, they can only recruit, let's say, juniors and seniors, but they can educate on down the line. So if businesses start getting a little more of that thought process, that we can start chasing them for employment as a junior or senior and keep that relationship, even if they do need a college degree, that's great. But let's start educating these kids and building those relationships at that 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade. North Carolina, and Senator Ballard, if you can, maybe you do or don't know this, I keep hearing a number that there's a number of truck drivers needed in North Carolina by a certain date, and it's like 60,000 or something. It's an exorbitant number by 2030, if I'm thinking right. Well, we have to be letting kids that are in grade school now know that that's a opportunity and a place for them to go for that to play out. So I think businesses are starting to really catch on to letting everybody get on that same page.
Well, I mean, this is also part of the reason why I would say, the My Future NC, we have a statewide attainment goal. So, I mean, everyone has to be thinking, a little further down the line here and wanting to hit this goal. So I think that's just really helpful in businesses, employers, education system to think through pathways, to think through resources, more on a longer runway scale than necessarily in the immediate. So trying to help in the immediate as well is critical.
Yeah.
I always they call it the 401k mentality. You have to really start thinking about it young. And with me being workforce development, I actually introduce myself to people as being pre-talent acquisition, because you're right. Talent acquisition, their goal is current hiring. And I will say it really helps to have an organization that supports an individual that is their focus is workforce development, because it's truly a full-time job versus putting it on somebody in HR who already has a full-time job, doing something within human resources, and being able to take the time to form the partnerships and to think through and to do those projections and to explore all the different opportunities, because there's many ways that you can, start creating that pipeline.
Great. Well, we're at 10:04. We're a little past 10:45, which is kind of, I think we're going to open it up. We've got several questions for you guys that I think are productive. And we've got several questions that deal with, so I'm going to kind of try and put them together, but kind of, I guess in a general way, there's an understanding or kind of a perception of, kids in high school that like getting a 4-year degree is kind of the only path to a good paying, good career. But there are actually, like we all know, lots of really great career paths that don't require a 4-year degree. And so, would love for all of you guys to kind of talk about, from your perspective, how we can kind of get that message out to students, and kind of what is currently being done to show students that, you know, a 4-year degree is great, right? Everything is great, but there are lots of other opportunities that exist that, you know, can produce a great career that don't require that.
So I can speak from the healthcare arena on that. We actually have programs that target, you know, that thought process. You know, some students go into our program thinking that they want to be in healthcare, but when they are actually exposed to it, they find out that they don't want to be in healthcare at all, which is actually great. It's a win-win, because think of all the time, effort, energy, and money they just saved to be able to go into another path. And so we actually have nights where we open up with our partnerships with both the community colleges and the 4-year colleges for them to come in and talk about what they are and what they're not, and what programs they can offer, and what the opportunities are with all those different programs. So we actually have jobs that you can't go to a 4-year university and actually do. It's a 2-year college degree, and you can have a very, you know, sustained lifestyle with those jobs. It's just making sure that they're aware of what those opportunities are, where they would need to go in order to obtain them, and what all are the jobs that they could get with that degree. And then, you know, there's also trades. You know, we need tradesmen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if I can kind of piggyback on that real quick, I think Jeff was the one that was asking kind of the question. So I would say there's not necessarily maybe anything that's statewide that's like a policy or a marketing effort that really does that quite yet, though we have been trying to figure out some thoughts on that. But I would say that one thing in the budget, if you look at the November budget of 2021, I mean, there were a lot of dollars actually in the community college space towards, you know, creating more awareness, whether it's expanding apprenticeships or whether it's work-based learning. And actually, you know, we've tapped Central Piedmont to really develop perhaps a fast track on work-based learning opportunities to get that certificate even sooner and out the door. But really also trying to get students, like actual community college students who have maybe just completed their nurse, getting them in front of students and telling their story is happening, and probably happening a bit more and more. I was just in a high school on Friday down in Wilkes, and I mean, he was a Wilkes, you know, public high school graduate and out of school, and got a 2-year even certificate while working with a construction company or electrical company, sorry. And, you know, was able to tell their story about, hey, he loves being home. He wanted to stick around and stay close by, and was able to, you know, and talked about kind of the salary range that he was in. So I do think there are efforts to educate students with more personal testimonials in terms of what you really can get, you know, what a successful and like high paying job you can get at the age of 20. I mean, that's just crazy. I tell these kids all the time, you make more money than me. I'm a legislator, and they think I make 150,000. I'm like, jot that down. I mean, it's like 15 grand a year. And so I'm like, so it's been really fun to see some of that play out more and more. But there have been some thinking and thoughts on how to really continue to change and shift that narrative. But the only way some of that can happen is just through, you know, high impact communication strategies too. So, you know, to whatever scale we can do that, we just got to think through that.
One partnership, I'm sorry, Catherine. One partnership we have is a summer camp where we actually take students over to the community college for a 4-day camp. So 2 days they're in there looking at every single health career opportunity there is, and it's a hands-on, not a sit at a desk and just be told about it. They're actually in there, you know, with the ultrasound machine, actually touching, feeling, doing, very engaging. And they're taught all those different things about, you know, what that course curriculum looks like. And then we bring them over to the medical center for 2 days where they actually shadow some of those disciplines on a rotational basis. So they get like a 2-hour window glimpse, so they can connect what it was they just saw in the academia to what they just saw in the actual, you know, job.
But teachers are also doing that too. I mean, let's not forget, we're trying to get students in, but there are actual you know, teacher sort of immersion type, you know, weeks sometimes during the summer, and exposing teachers to even, you know, just how the industry workplace, you know, is changing too. So that, I mean, it's just across multiple, you know, populations, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're seeing that more and more back in Missouri, Senator Ballard, with they call them an externship program that schools and counties are getting involved in, and it is growing dramatically. And the benefits of getting that teacher, counselor, CTE person out of the building and in front of the local manufacturing trades, whatever it will be for them to see that it's been thriving.
And Jake, I know we're running out of time, so just real quickly, as far as apprenticeship, the majority of them are 2-year degrees, but what we're seeing now is that as I mentioned earlier, the apprentices are wanting to do more. So employers are creating, we are working with several of the universities. A&T University actually has a registered apprenticeship program, but we're also working with Cisco and Siemens and others to create that career path that even though, you can get your 2-year degree, there's also that opportunity to get the 4-year degree as well. So it's going full circle with the education piece. So there are lots of absolutely fabulous jobs that when you finish your apprenticeship in a 2-year degree, you're making on the average at least $60,000, a year. And with this, it's also extending that career pathway so that employers can grow within of their workforce, and in addition to creating new pipelines for talent.
Great. Yeah. Well, I think we're just about out of time, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but I thought this was a great conversation, and I just want to thank the panelists for their time and their expertise and willingness to share. I want to thank ScholarPath for sponsoring the time, this webinar and giving us the opportunity to do it. And I want to thank everybody who spent a little time with us this morning. So hopefully this was worth your time. You thought the content was valuable, and we hope to see you at a chamber event in the future. And like I said, so here are a couple of events coming up that the chamber have to take a look at. But again, want to thank everybody for attending. And if you have any questions or you want to chat, feel free to reach out to me. Would love to schedule a time and talk about any of this and connect you with whomever. But appreciate it. Thank you. This was great, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their Thursday.